When Major Emma Phantom Hayes boarded Flight 2847 as an undercover intelligence operative, she expected a routine mission. But when every electrical system failed at 37,000 feet, leaving 234 passengers plummeting toward Earth in silent terror, she faced an impossible choice: blow her cover or watch everyone die. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. On Tuesday, March 15, 2025 at 2:30 p.m., Major Emma Phantom Hayes settled into Seat 17C of American Airlines Flight 2847. She wore a simple black blazer over a white blouse, carrying a worn leather laptop bag that screamed mid-level corporate executive. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and unremarkable reading glasses completed the disguise. To any observer, she was just another businesswoman on another routine flight from Dallas to Denver. The Boeing 767-300ER carried 234 passengers and 6 crew members on what should have been an unremarkable 2-hour journey. The passenger manifest showed the usual Tuesday afternoon mix: oil executives returning from Houston meetings, families heading to Colorado ski resorts, college students visiting friends, and dozens of business travelers like Emma. "First time to Denver?" asked Lisa Chin in 17B, a cheerful marketing executive settling in with her Starbucks coffee and Harvard Business Review. "Business trip," Emma replied with a polite but reserved smile. "Should be a quick visit." "I love Denver," Lisa continued. "Great restaurants, beautiful mountains. I'm heading there for a digital marketing conference." "What kind of business are you in?" "Financial consulting," Emma answered smoothly, maintaining her cover story. She had memorized an entire background as Sarah Mitchell, senior analyst for a consulting firm based in Phoenix. The identity had been carefully constructed with supporting documentation, work history, and even fake social media profiles. What none of the 240 people aboard could have guessed was that Major Emma Phantom Hayes was one of the most highly classified pilots in the United States Air Force. She had flown stealth missions over hostile territory, tested experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist, and completed black operations so secret that her own family believed she worked as a computer programmer in Nevada. Her call sign, Phantom, had been earned during her 3rd combat deployment, when she successfully penetrated Iranian airspace undetected to gather intelligence on nuclear facilities. She had flown a 14-hour mission, navigating through multiple layers of sophisticated air defense systems, photographing targets that provided critical intelligence, and returning to base without anyone knowing she had ever been there. Emma had graduated at the top of her class from the Air Force Academy, completed advanced pilot training with distinction, and been selected for the most elite flight programs in military aviation. She held multiple degrees in aeronautical engineering, had test-piloted aircraft worth billions of dollars, and possessed security clearances that allowed access to the most sensitive information in the United States government. Today's assignment was different but no less critical. Emma was traveling under diplomatic cover to meet intelligence contacts in Denver, carrying encrypted data about terrorist financial networks that could prevent coordinated attacks across 3 countries. The intelligence had been gathered over 18 months of dangerous undercover work by assets who had risked their lives to penetrate terrorist organizations planning to kill hundreds of innocent civilians. The commercial flight was supposed to be the safest part of her mission. She would land in Denver, meet her contacts at a safe house, transfer the intelligence, and disappear back into the classified world where she belonged. As Flight 2847 climbed toward 37,000 feet, Emma opened her laptop and worked on authentic financial reports that supported her cover identity. The reports were real. Her cover was supported by an actual consulting firm that employed intelligence operatives in legitimate business roles. To anyone watching, she looked like thousands of other business travelers getting work done during their flight. The aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude, and Captain Michael Rodriguez made his standard announcement about smooth flying conditions and expected arrival time. Emma allowed herself a small smile as she looked out the window at the Colorado landscape below. In less than 2 hours she would complete her mission and return to her classified world. She had no way of knowing that in exactly 47 minutes, everything would change forever. The first sign that something was catastrophically wrong wasn't an alarm or explosion. It was silence. Complete, absolute, terrifying silence that fell over Flight 2847 like a heavy blanket, smothering every sound that defined normal aircraft operation. Emma noticed it immediately because her military training had taught her to pay conscious attention to sounds most people unconsciously filtered out. The constant hum of twin Pratt & Whitney engines producing 60,000 pounds of thrust each. The whisper of air conditioning systems circulating cabin air. The subtle vibrations of an aircraft cutting through atmosphere at 500 miles per hour. All of it stopped simultaneously, as if someone had thrown a master switch controlling every system. The silence was so complete and sudden that it felt supernatural. One moment, Flight 2847 was a perfectly functioning example of modern aviation technology. The next moment, it had been transformed into something that belonged in a nightmare rather than the real world of commercial aviation. Other passengers took longer to realize what was happening, their brains struggling to process an impossible situation. The businessman in 17A looked up from his in-flight movie with confusion, wondering why his entertainment system had suddenly gone dark. Lisa Chin stopped reading her magazine, sensing that familiar flight sounds had disappeared but not understanding what that meant for their survival. A child in row 12 asked her mother why the airplane had gotten so quiet. An elderly man wondered aloud if they were landing early. A college student joked to his friend that maybe they had run out of gas, not realizing how close to truth his joke actually was. Then the cabin lights went out. All of them. Every light in the passenger compartment died simultaneously in what could only be described as total electrical failure across every system aboard the aircraft. 4 seconds that felt like hours, the cabin was plunged into complete darkness, broken only by pale afternoon sunlight filtering through passenger windows. The darkness triggered immediate panic responses. Someone screamed. Children began crying. Adults reached for cell phones, trying to activate flashlight functions on devices that had also mysteriously stopped working. Emergency lighting flickered on within seconds, activated by independent battery systems designed to function during complete electrical failure. But instead of warm, comfortable lighting, the emergency lights cast an eerie red glow throughout the aircraft, making it feel like a submarine that had taken a direct hit. "What's going on?" someone asked shakily from the front of the cabin. "Why did everything stop?" called another passenger, anxiety clear in their voice. "Are we going to crash?" whispered a teenage girl to her mother, voicing the question forming in everyone's mind. "Mom, I'm scared," said a 6-year-old boy, starting to cry as he sensed the adult fear around him. Emma felt the aircraft begin to descend, and immediately recognized this wasn't the controlled descent of a normal approach. This was the steady, inexorable glide of an aircraft that had lost all propulsion and electrical systems. Essentially a 200-ton glider slowly falling toward Earth with 240 people aboard. The mathematics of their situation were stark. At 37,000 feet with no engines, they had perhaps 20 to 30 minutes before they would be forced to land somewhere, whether that somewhere was suitable or not. Every second brought them closer to Earth, and there would be no opportunity for a second attempt. The intercom crackled with Captain Rodriguez's voice, fighting to sound calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties with our aircraft systems. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened while we work to resolve the situation. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for possible emergency procedures." But Emma knew from his tone, from how the aircraft was flying, and from her extensive experience with aviation emergencies that this wasn't something that could be resolved with standard procedures. Flight 2847 was in serious trouble, and 234 passengers plus 6 crew members were depending on the flight crew to find a solution to a problem that might have no solution. In the cockpit, Captain Michael Rodriguez and First Officer Jennifer Kim faced every airline pilot's worst nightmare. Complete electrical failure at 37,000 feet with 240 souls aboard and no explanation for what had gone wrong. Rodriguez had been flying commercial aircraft for 18 years, accumulating over 12,000 flight hours in everything from regional jets to wide-body international aircraft. He had dealt with engine failures, hydraulic problems, severe weather, and numerous other emergencies, but he had never encountered complete electrical failure affecting every system simultaneously. Kim had been Rodriguez's co-pilot for 3 years and trusted his experience, but she could see the concern in his eyes as he tried to understand what had happened to their aircraft. She had over 8,000 flight hours and extensive emergency training, but nothing had prepared her for this situation. "What the hell just happened, Michael?" Kim asked, frantically checking circuit breakers and attempting to restart systems that weren't responding. "Complete electrical failure across all systems, both engines flamed out simultaneously," Rodriguez replied, his hands moving across controls no longer connected to anything functional. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like something just turned off every electrical system at exactly the same moment." The sophisticated Boeing 767-300ER had been reduced to little more than a glider with basic flight controls and minimal instrumentation. The fly-by-wire systems were dead, navigation computers offline, communication radios silent, and even basic instruments like artificial horizons and airspeed indicators were no longer functioning. They were flying manually now, using only mechanical linkages between flight controls and aircraft surfaces, relying on visual references and basic mechanical instruments that didn't require electrical power. Every input had to be made by feel and experience rather than computer assistance. "Try both radios," Rodriguez ordered. Kim attempted to contact air traffic control on multiple frequencies, but the radios were as dead as everything else. They had no way to communicate with ground controllers, no way to declare an emergency through official channels, no way to coordinate with air traffic control facilities that were probably wondering why Flight 2847 had suddenly disappeared from radar. "Radio silence on all frequencies," Kim reported. "We're completely cut off." The implications were serious. Air traffic controllers would soon notice that Flight 2847 had disappeared from radar, and they would begin emergency procedures assuming the aircraft had crashed. Search and rescue operations would be initiated, but rescuers would be looking in the wrong places. "Captain," Kim said quietly, consulting a mechanical altimeter. "We're passing through 33,000 feet, descending at approximately 500 feet per minute. At this rate, we have maybe 25 minutes before we have to find somewhere to land." The mathematical reality was unforgiving. They were losing 1,500 feet every 3 minutes. From 33,000 feet, they would be down to 15,000 feet in 36 minutes, and at that point they needed to be on final approach or they would crash into whatever terrain was beneath them. The problem was geography and navigation. They were flying over remote, mountainous Colorado territory, hundreds of miles from major airports. Denver International was too far away for them to glide safely. Smaller regional airports were scattered throughout Colorado, but locating them without GPS or radio navigation would be nearly impossible. "Start looking for airports, any airports," Rodriguez told Kim, knowing it was probably futile but recognizing they had to try every option. Kim began studying paper charts by natural light, trying to identify nearby airports that might be within gliding range. Without knowing their exact position and without being able to calculate precise glide distances, it was largely guesswork. Meanwhile, the aircraft continued its steady descent through Colorado airspace, carrying 240 people toward an uncertain fate. Emma sat quietly in seat 17C, analyzing the situation with the trained mind of a military pilot who had faced impossible situations in combat zones around the world. She understood exactly what was happening to Flight 2847, and she knew the mathematics of their situation better than almost anyone else on the aircraft. A total electrical failure at high altitude was one of the most dangerous emergencies that could befall any aircraft. Without engines providing thrust, the aircraft became a glider with limited time to reach a suitable landing site. Without navigation systems, the crew was essentially flying blind. Without radio communication, they couldn't coordinate with air traffic control or request assistance. Emma's extensive military training gave her knowledge and skills that weren't part of standard commercial pilot training. She had trained for situations where enemy action or equipment failure left her with minimal functioning systems, learning dead stick landing techniques, visual navigation methods, and emergency procedures designed to save aircraft and crew when conventional methods failed. She knew how to navigate using terrain features when GPS was unavailable. She understood energy management principles that allowed pilots to maximize gliding distance and arrive at landing sites with precisely the right altitude and airspeed. She had practiced emergency landings in conditions that would terrify most civilian pilots. But her orders for this mission had been absolutely clear: maintain cover at all costs regardless of circumstances. Her presence on this flight was classified at the highest levels, her destination was compartmentalized information, and her mission was so sensitive that revealing her identity could compromise intelligence operations affecting national security. Emma had been specifically briefed that under no circumstances should she reveal her military identity unless directly ordered by a superior officer or unless doing so was absolutely necessary to prevent compromise of an even more critical operation. The intelligence she carried related to terrorist financial networks planning coordinated attacks on civilian targets across 3 countries. If her mission was compromised, those attacks might succeed, potentially killing thousands of innocent people. Emma wrestled with an impossible decision as Flight 2847 continued to descend through 30,000 feet, losing precious altitude with every passing second. She could potentially save 234 lives by revealing her identity and assisting with the emergency landing, but doing so would blow her cover and potentially endanger missions that could save thousands of lives. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her as she watched fellow passengers struggling with fear. The cold calculus of military strategy suggested she should remain in her seat, maintain her cover and let events unfold. The intelligence she carried was strategically worth more than the lives of 234 civilians, from a mathematical perspective. But Emma Hayes wasn't just a military officer following orders, she was a human being who had sworn an oath to protect innocent people from harm. She couldn't save thousands of potential terrorist victims if she didn't survive the next 20 minutes. The woman in 17B was quietly crying, clutching her cell phone even though there was no signal. Lisa Chin was probably thinking about family members who would never know what happened, about the wedding she had mentioned during boarding that might never happen. The man in 17A stared straight ahead with the blank expression of someone whose mind had shut down in the face of incomprehensible danger. Around the cabin, passengers displayed various stages of fear, denial, and desperate hope. Some prayed in different languages, others cried silently while comforting children, many attempted to call loved ones on phones that couldn't connect. Children asked parents questions that adults couldn't answer without causing more panic. Teenagers frantically tried to post updates on social media that couldn't upload. Business travelers checked phones obsessively, as if finding a signal could solve their fundamental problem. Emma looked across the aisle at a young mother holding her 6-year-old daughter, trying to explain why the airplane wasn't making noise anymore. The little girl kept asking if they were going to see Daddy when they got to Denver, and her mother didn't know what to say. The woman's eyes were filled with tears she was trying not to let fall, determined to stay strong for her daughter's sake. Behind them, an elderly couple held hands and whispered quietly, probably sharing words they never expected to need. A businessman was writing frantically on paper, perhaps composing final messages to family. College students who had been laughing during boarding were now silent, staring out windows at Colorado landscape below. That image, ordinary people facing mortality with courage and love, crystallized Emma's decision. She had become a soldier to protect people like that mother and daughter, like the elderly couple, like the young woman planning her wedding. She couldn't abandon them when she had the power to save their lives. Her mission would be compromised, her cover blown, her career might be over, and critical intelligence operations might be endangered. But sometimes being a soldier meant making the hard choice to save the lives in front of you, even when it meant sacrificing strategic objectives. Emma Hayes unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Miss, you need to return to your seat immediately," said Flight Attendant Sarah Jenkins as Emma moved toward the front of the aircraft. Sarah was a veteran flight attendant with 15 years of experience, and she had seen passengers react to emergencies in many ways, but something about this woman's demeanor was different. "I need to speak to the captain immediately," Emma said with sudden authority that cut through the cabin noise. Her voice carried the unmistakable tone of command that came from years of leading military operations. "I'm Major Emma Hayes, United States Air Force. I'm a pilot and I believe I can help with this situation." Sarah stared in complete disbelief. The quiet businesswoman from 17C had just claimed to be a military pilot. It seemed impossible, like something from a movie. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see identification," Sarah said, trying to maintain professional composure while dealing with what might be a passenger having a breakdown under stress. Emma pulled out her military identification card, which she had hoped never to reveal during this mission. The card identified her as Major Emma Hayes, United States Air Force, with security clearances most civilians never saw. The photograph matched perfectly, and the card had sophisticated security features marking it as authentic government identification. "You're really military?" Sarah asked, still not quite believing but beginning to hope. "Fighter pilot with 15 years of experience flying everything from basic trainers to the most advanced aircraft in the Air Force inventory," Emma replied with calm confidence. "I've dealt with complete electrical failures before, I know dead-stick landing techniques that might work with this aircraft, and I understand visual navigation methods that could help us find a suitable landing site." Sarah made a quick decision based on instinct and desperation. Military training was unmistakable once you knew what to look for, and everything about Emma's bearing suggested she was exactly who she claimed to be. "Follow me to the cockpit." As Emma walked toward the front, passengers stared with mixtures of hope, disbelief, and desperate optimism. Some wondered if she was having a breakdown, others hoped she might actually have the skills to help them survive. "Who is she?" asked the man from 17A. "She says she's a pilot," replied Lisa Chin, wiping tears from her eyes. "Air Force. Can she really help us?" asked the young mother, speaking for everyone who desperately wanted to believe salvation might be possible. The revelation that there was a military pilot aboard spread quickly through the cabin in whispered conversations. For the first time since the emergency began, Passengers allowed themselves to believe they might actually survive. As Emma entered the cockpit, she immediately assessed the situation with trained eyes that had dealt with aircraft emergencies in much more dangerous conditions. Rodriguez and Kim were struggling with an aircraft transformed from sophisticated airliner into basic glider. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm Major Emma Hayes, United States Air Force," she said, showing her military identification. "I'm here to help you save this aircraft and everyone aboard." Rodriguez looked at Emma with desperate relief and natural skepticism. "You're really Air Force?" "Fighter pilot with 15 years of experience in everything from F-16s to experimental aircraft that don't officially exist," Emma replied, already analyzing the darkened instruments. "I've dealt with total electrical failures before, and I know dead-stick landing techniques that might work. Can you get our systems back online?" Kim asked hopefully. "No," Emma said honestly. "Whatever hit this aircraft destroyed every electrical system simultaneously. That damage is permanent until major repairs. But I can help you land safely without those systems." "What's our current altitude and position?" 28,000 feet, descending at 500 feet per minute, Rodriguez replied. "We've been trying to figure out position, but without navigation." Emma looked out the windows and began using landmarks with accuracy that amazed both pilots. "I can see the Colorado River Valley to the south. That mountain ridge with the distinctive double peak is the Grand Hogback Formation. Based on those landmarks and flight time from Dallas, we're roughly 60 miles northwest of Grand Junction, Colorado. There's a regional airport with a 9,000-foot runway well within our gliding range." Rodriguez and Kim stared in amazement. They had been trying to determine position for 20 minutes without success, and she had located them in less than a minute using terrain features. "How did you know that?" Kim asked. "Military navigation training," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "We learned to fly without GPS or electronic aids in case enemy forces jam signals. Visual navigation using terrain features is basic survival skill for military pilots." She began analyzing the aircraft's condition using techniques beyond standard commercial training, calculating weight and balance, estimating glide performance, determining optimal airspeeds, mental calculations most pilots relied on computers to perform. "Captain Rodriguez, I need you to trust me completely and follow my instructions exactly," Emma said with calm authority. "We can land this aircraft safely, but we'll use methods not covered in commercial pilot training. Are you willing to let me help save 234 lives?" Rodriguez looked into Emma's eyes and saw the confidence of someone who had faced death and survived through skill and determination. "Major Hayes, right now you're the best chance these people have. Tell me what you need me to do." Emma began coordinating the emergency landing with systematic precision that had made her one of the Air Force's most trusted pilots. She calculated glide ratios and energy management in her head, using mathematical skills most commercial pilots never developed. "At our current weight of approximately 320,000 pounds, we can glide roughly 100 nautical miles from this altitude under optimal conditions," she explained, processing factors like aircraft weight, air density, wind conditions, and Boeing 767 aerodynamic characteristics. "Grand Junction Regional is approximately 50 nautical miles away, giving us comfortable safety margin." "But how do we find the airport without navigation?" Kim asked. "Visual navigation and dead reckoning," Emma replied, pointing out geographical features. "See that highway running east-west? That's Interstate 70. We follow it west until we reach the Colorado River Valley, then look for the airport." She began teaching emergency procedures not covered in commercial training. The key to successful dead-stick landing is energy management. We can't add energy by advancing throttles, so we must ensure we don't waste the potential energy we have. Too fast and we overshoot, too slow and we come up short. No opportunity for go-around. As Flight 2847 descended through 15,000 feet, Emma guided Rodriguez through the most challenging approach of his career. With no engines, no electrical systems, no communication, they were attempting to land a 200-ton aircraft using only visual references and manual controls. "Grand Junction Airport should become visible in 2 minutes, Emma said, studying terrain with trained eyes. "Look for flat area in the river valley with runways appearing as straight lines cutting across landscape." The approach required skills beyond normal commercial flying. Emma simultaneously calculated glide angles, estimated wind drift, monitored airspeed using visual cues, and planned descent profile to arrive with exactly the right altitude and energy. "There." Kim pointed ahead. "I can see what looks like an airport." Emma confirmed identification using military recognition techniques. "That's it. Grand Junction Regional, runway 11 to 29, approximately 9,000 feet long, more than adequate for our needs. Runway is oriented east-west, so minimal crosswind issues. She guided Rodriguez through a spiral descent that allowed them to lose altitude while keeping the airport in sight, a technique developed for military operations where pilots might need to land at unfamiliar airfields without ground support. Keep the airport at your 2 o'clock and maintain this descent rate, Emma instructed. We'll spiral down to traffic pattern altitude, then execute straight-in approach to runway 11. The final approach to runway 11 was unlike anything Rodriguez had ever attempted. With no engines and no instruments, he was flying entirely by visual references and Emma's calm instructions. Airspeed looks good based on angle of attack and descent rate, Emma said, monitoring their approach using techniques that didn't require working instruments. She judged speed by rate of ground features passing beneath them, a skill learned during low-level combat flying where instrument failure could mean death. Descent rate is perfect for current energy state. You're doing excellent work, Captain. The aircraft descended through 1,000 feet above runway, still gliding silently through clear Colorado sky. In the passenger cabin, people could see ground getting closer through windows, but the continued silence made the approach feel surreal and terrifying. 500 feet above touchdown, Emma called out. Start your flare in 3, 1, and now. Rodriguez pulled back gently on controls, raising the nose to reduce descent rate. It was the most critical moment requiring perfect timing. Too early and they would stall short of runway, too late and they would hit pavement too hard. Perfect technique, Emma said calmly. Hold that attitude. Let the aircraft settle naturally. Main landing gear touched down with firm but controlled impact that sent a shudder through the aircraft. The Boeing 767 bounced slightly, then settled and began rolling down the runway. Reverse thrust. Kim called automatically. Brakes only, Emma reminded them. But we have plenty of runway length. Flight 2847 rolled down the 9,000-foot runway in complete silence, gradually slowing until it came to a complete stop exactly halfway down the runway. For a long moment, nobody in the cockpit spoke. They had just accomplished something most pilots would consider impossible, successful dead-stick landing of a fully loaded airliner with 240 people aboard, all alive and uninjured. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with relief and pride, welcome to Grand Junction, Colorado. Please remain seated while emergency personnel assist us, and thank you for flying American Airlines. The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause lasting several minutes, with passengers crying, laughing, and embracing strangers who had shared their terrifying experience. 234 passengers and 6 crew members had just lived through one of the most remarkable emergency landings in aviation history. As Flight 2847 stopped on the runway, emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft within seconds. But there were no fires, no serious injuries, no structural damage. The landing had been so skillfully executed that most passengers experienced nothing worse than a firm touchdown. Federal investigators later discovered that Flight 2847 had been struck by an electromagnetic pulse from a classified military test gone wrong. The pulse had simultaneously disabled every electrical system while leaving mechanical controls intact. Major Hayes employed advanced techniques not taught in civilian programs, NTSB lead investigator Dr. Sarah Wilson reported to Congress. Her military experience was literally the difference between successful emergency landing saving 234 lives and catastrophic accident killing everyone aboard. Emma found herself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight completely contrary to her military training emphasizing invisibility. Her years of serving in shadows were replaced by media attention as she was treated like a celebrity for doing what she considered basic duty. I wasn't thinking about being a hero, Emma told reporters. I was thinking about 234 people in danger who might die if I didn't use skills the Air Force taught me. When you have ability to help people, you help them. Instead of disciplinary action for compromising her mission, Emma received orders that would fundamentally change her career. She was transferred to develop comprehensive training helping commercial pilots deal with emergencies like the one she had faced. Your knowledge of dead-stick approaches, visual navigation, and emergency energy management could potentially save countless civilian lives, General Patricia Martinez explained. We want you to create a program teaching these techniques to airline pilots worldwide. Emma accepted enthusiastically, recognizing it as opportunity to serve her country in a new way honoring both her military training and commitment to aviation safety. Today, Colonel Emma Phantom Hayes directs the most comprehensive aviation safety program in the world. Her techniques are taught to pilots in more than 50 countries, Her research has led to new safety protocols adopted by airlines worldwide, and her influence on aviation safety will be felt for generations. She still flies regularly and often chooses seat 17C when traveling commercially, partly out of nostalgia, partly as reminder of importance of being prepared for the unexpected, and partly because she enjoys remaining connected to the passenger experience that transformed her from classified military pilot into global advocate for aviation safety. More than 15,000 commercial pilots have completed Emma's training program, and the techniques she developed have been used successfully in dozens of real-world emergencies around the globe. Her methods have saved an estimated 3,000 lives in situations where aircraft might otherwise have been lost. The intelligence mission that was compromised when Emma revealed her identity was eventually completed through alternate channels, and the terrorist attacks that had been planned were successfully prevented. Emma learned years later that her decision to save 234 lives hadn't ultimately cost any lives in the broader intelligence operation. Sometimes the right decision in the moment isn't the decision that makes sense from strategic planning perspective, Emma reflects. I couldn't save thousands of theoretical victims if I let 234 real people die when I had the knowledge and skills to save them. Being a soldier means protecting people, and sometimes that means making hard choices about who you can help right now. The woman in row 17 was supposed to stay hidden, complete her classified mission, and disappear back into military secrecy. But when Flight 2847 went silent at 11 kilometers above Earth, Emma Phantom Hayes made a choice that changed not only her life but the entire field of aviation safety. She chose to save 234 strangers instead of protecting her secret mission. She chose to reveal herself instead of remaining invisible. She chose to take control when everyone else was helpless. She chose humanity over duty, immediate action over strategic patience, and the lives in front of her over abstract missions. Today, when pilots worldwide practice dead-stick landings and visual navigation, when they train for emergencies they hope will never happen, they use skills perfected by a woman who learned that true heroism isn't about staying hidden in shadows, it's about stepping forward when people need you most, regardless of personal cost. She was just a passenger in row 17, reading reports and drinking coffee like any other business traveler. But when their plane went silent 11 kilometers above Earth, Emma Hayes became exactly what 234 people needed. A pilot whose training could turn an impossible situation into safe landing, and whose courage could transform a day of terror into a story of hope inspiring aviators worldwide. The silence that fell over Flight 2847 that Tuesday afternoon was broken not by engines returning to life, but by the voice of a hero who chose to stop hiding and start saving lives.